Hey everybody, Doc Parsley here. Wanted to talk a little bit about what we can do as active participants in this societal experiment we're calling the COVID pandemic. So, of course, there's a lot of doom and gloom and a lot of scare, a lot of fear. We'll talk about that in a minute. I wanted to first address an article that I saw about a done by a research company, Evidently, I think is the name of it, Evidentation, something like that. And they're talking about how during, or since the beginning of this epidemic, they've been tracking, I think since March 1, people's data from like Garmin's and Fitbits and Oura Rings and all that type of stuff, and they're collecting it centrally, and they're talking about how people are behaving across the entire country. And so one of the really good news is that people are sleeping a lot more, which is key. It is the key, it's the number one thing for improving your immune system, also improving your mood. And again, we'll talk about that in a minute. But the downside is that apparently people are far less active. So we've had anywhere from a 10 to 25% increase in sleep, depending on what state you're from. But about almost a 40% decrease in activity. So a lot of people are saying, well, I can't go to the gym, I can't do the things that I ordinarily do. I don't know, I guess you could do martial arts or dance or things that involve other people. Obviously, New Yorkers aren't walking everywhere like they ordinarily do, so there's a lot sort of baked into the cake there, things that you can't necessarily do anything about. But I just encourage everybody to keep in mind how important the activity is. So activity does not have to be exercise proper. It doesn't have to be qualified as exercise. It just needs to be activity. So that can be cleaning your house, that can be washing your car, that can be mowing your lawn, whatever, decluttering the attic, just like being active, doing things around whatever area you're staying in. And then, activity can be walking up and down stairs, it can be walking to and from the store if you're in a place where you can still do all those types of things. But just don't underestimate, one, the impact of activity, but two, the impact of activity specifically on your immune system during this time. Just the physiological movement of your body causes a change in lots of your stress hormones, and it causes change, and those stress hormone changes lead to cardiovascular changes, neurocognitive changes, like how fast your heart's beating, also how much your blood vessels are dilated, and what your blood pressure is. And that's just doing simple activity. If washing your car or something, your heart rate's gonna probably be around 100, 110 or something. Not quite exercise, but it's activity, and it's increasing blood flow, and it's decreasing the effects of blood glucose. Blood glucose is kind of a negative aspect on the stress hormones, makes you more prone to stress and more prone to disease, having higher blood glucose. And that kind of ties into possibly the more important thing during this is actually stress. So when we are worried about stuff, we have more stress hormones. When we have more stress hormones, we don't sleep as well. So even if we're sleeping 10% more or 20% more, but the quality of our sleep is 10% less or 20% less, we're at a net zero, right? I think that most people are experiencing some level of stress whether they recognize it or not, and that doesn't have to be fear. Stress is anything that's perceived from the body as an environmental concern that has to be dealt with. So it doesn't necessarily have to be fear. It can be concern, it can just be extra work, it can be all sorts of things. But what you want to do to best prepare yourself for the inevitability of you being exposed to this virus, I'd say over the course of 6 months, definitely to a year, probably every person on this planet is going to be exposed to this virus. We know 85% of us will have mild to no symptoms whatsoever. If you're, depending on your age, it's even, it can be far greater than 85%. It could be 95% 99% won't have any significant disease from it. And we think it's going to develop some reasonable immunity to having it again. So the fact that everybody's going to be exposed to it means that at some point your immune system is going to have to deal with it. And the healthier your immune system is, not only the less disease do you have, but the less likely you are to give the disease to somebody else, right? Or the viral infection. So if you have the viral infection and it causes a big ramp up so what the viral infection does is when the virus isn't alive, right? It's just it's genetic information inside of a protein shell. It gets into your bloodstream, it attaches itself to cells, it puts its genetic information into that cell, and then it changes what that cell does. And so instead of that cell being a liver cell or muscle cell or brain cell or whatever, it gets that cell, and I don't think it does the brain, a bad example, but in the lungs obviously is a big issue. It gets those cells to, instead of doing what they ordinarily do, it gets them to make a whole bunch of this virus. And when this virus gets made, when enough of this virus gets made, it actually causes the cell to rupture, and then all of those viruses go into your bloodstream and they attack other cells, or they attach to other cells, and this process goes on and on. Now, eventually your immune system beats it, right? And the problem with this being a novel virus right now is you don't have an acquired immunity, which means that you've been exposed to it, you develop antibodies, which is a way for your immune system to tag the virus. And once it gets tagged, that's like putting like a little beacon on it, and now the whole immune system knows to kill that. Get rid of it, let's chop it up in little pieces. So if you have a bunch of that virus around, and you have a very low immune function, then that virus spreads a lot faster than if you have a very high immune system and just a little bit of that virus. And so the amount of time it takes your body to respond to the threat and learn how to mark that virus and get rid of it, that's how long you have the infection, and that's how long you can spread it. So if you're coughing or sneezing, getting on your hands, touching other things, the more virus you have in you, the more likely you are to be able to spread it to somebody else. And then if it takes you 2 weeks to clear it instead of a week to clear it, or it takes you 3 weeks instead of 2 weeks, that's just an extra week that you could possibly infect somebody else. So to be a good citizen, not only for your own health, but to be a good citizen, a good good member of your society and your community, you want to do your very best to prevent yourself from needing serious medical attention on this, and you want to prevent yourself from giving it to somebody else. So activity is in that bag. You can't just throw the activity out because maybe you're sleeping a little bit more, or because there's limitations to what type of activity you can get. The human body is hundreds of thousands of years old, and we've been active long before we had gyms. So there's lots of stuff that you can do. Just walking, going on bike rides, simple things, playing with your kids, doing those projects at home. That activity is going to be very important in maintaining not only your stress hormones from that aspect, but also your stress hormones from just worrying about this virus. The more you read about this, the more media you consume talking about how dangerous it is, how many people are dying, that's adding stress to you. That increases stress hormones. Stress hormones decrease your immune system. Being active gets your mind off of that. Being active is sort of like a form of meditation. If you're doing something that you're really focused on, you're in the now. That decreases stress hormones. The activity itself decreases stress hormones. Intense exercise can actually increase stress hormones, but it can still be beneficial. I won't get into that. That's kind of nuanced. But I just wanted to remind everybody out there to have the highest probability of this impacting you the least. You need to sleep well. We need to exercise well, or be active. We need to eat well, because eating well helps our immune system as well. And then we need to control our stress. We need to mitigate our stress. And a lot of that has to do with mindfulness. Exercise, activity is a great way to take our focus off of all the stuff in the media. I'll do another one of these where I talk about the value of doing your own research. You don't have to be a graduate student or PhD or doctor to do your own research. I can give you some really simple sites to go through and hopefully calm yourself down with any concerns. This one thing this study did show is there was a significant increase in anxiety. So anytime you have decreased activity, you have increased anxiety. Anytime you have decreased sleep, you have increased anxiety. And then anytime you have a pandemic that's threatening the lives and the economy, you have a lot of stress hormones as well. So let's do what we can to help each other get through this. Everybody focus on the pillars of health and be safe out there, and don't forget to be active as well as keep sleeping. You doing a great job. Let's keep going. Thanks.